Abigail Whitmore pressed both palms flat against that locked door, and did not cry. She had buried her mother 3 hours ago under the worst July sun Red Willow Creek had seen in 20 years. Her black dress was soaked through, her feet had blistered twice over, and now a stranger's iron padlock was hanging where her mother's doorknob used to be. The whole town was watching. Not one of them moved to help her. That was the moment Abby stopped grieving and started fighting. If this story moves you, subscribe to this channel and drop the name of your city in the comments. I want to know how far this story travels. Now stay with me. Because what Abby found behind that locked door changed everything. The funeral had drawn a modest crowd, not because Eleanor Whitmore was unloved. She had lived in Red Willow Creek for 31 years, raised a daughter alone, kept her house, kept her garden, kept her mouth mostly shut, in the way women of that town were expected to do. People came because funerals were the one event in Red Willow Creek that required attendance like church and tax season. What they did not come to do was comfort her daughter. Abigail Whitmore stood at the graveside with her hat in both hands, turning the brim slowly between her thick fingers while Reverend Silas Boone read from the book of John in that rolling, practiced voice of his. The kind of voice that filled rooms and emptied pockets and made men feel righteous about decisions they had already made before they walked through the church door. Abby did not listen to the scripture. She watched Boone's hands instead. He held his Bible loosely, like a man comfortable with what he carried. His clerk, a thin young man named Pruitt, stood 2 steps behind him, holding a leather satchel that looked too full for a burial service. That bothered Abby. She did not know why yet. When it was done, people drifted past her with nods and lowered eyes and murmured phrases that meant nothing. She was a good woman. Sorry for your trouble. The Lord's will. One woman patted her arm without stopping, which was worse than nothing at all. Only Martha Bell stayed long enough to say something real. Martha ran the inn at the south end of town, a wide-hipped woman with gray-streaked hair, and the kind of eyes that had seen enough that they rarely looked surprised anymore. She took Abby's hand in both of hers and held it. You go straight home, Martha said quietly. Don't stop for anybody. You hear me? Abby looked at her. What do you know, Martha? Martha glanced once toward Boone's retreating back. Go home, Abby, before they do something you can't undo. She let go and walked away before Abby could ask anything else. Abby had not run in years. Her body did not cooperate with running. But she walked faster than people expected from a woman her size, and by the time she turned onto her mother's street, she was breathing hard, and her jaw was set, and the hat was still in her hand, forgotten. She saw the lock from 20 feet away. It was new, shiny. An iron padlock the size of her fist looped through a hasp that had been bolted directly into the doorframe since she was last here 2 days ago. Someone had put it there recently. The wood around the hasp screws was still pale where the old paint had cracked. She stood there for a moment. Just stood there. Then she heard boots behind her. Pruitt Boone's clerk appeared at her elbow with the leather satchel now open across one arm, already pulling out a folded document before she had turned to face him fully. Miss Whitmore, he said. He was young enough that his voice still climbed at the wrong moments. I've been asked to deliver this to you following the burial service. Reverend Boone sends his condolences. Abby took the paper. She unfolded it slowly. It was a transfer of property, dated 12 days ago. Her mother's name was at the bottom, signed in a thin, scratchy hand that Abby had known her entire life, and this was not it. Eleanor Whitmore had written in a wide, determined cursive, the kind that pressed hard into the paper. This signature leaned sideways and looked like it had been copied from something carefully, but not carefully enough. This is forged, Abby said. Pruitt blinked. Ma'am, I wouldn't know anything about. This is forged, she said again, slower this time, holding the page up toward him. My mother had a tremor in her right hand for the last 3 years. You can see it in every letter she ever wrote. There is no tremor here. Someone copied her signature. Someone who had seen it written, but never watched her write it. Pruitt took the paper back carefully. Miss Whitmore, the transfer was filed with the county clerk on the 14th. It's a legal document. The house and the property now belong to the First Church of Red Willow Creek, per your mother's stated final wishes. If you have concerns, you are welcome to— "Get off my porch," Abby said. "Miss Whitmore, get off my mother's porch." She took one step toward him, and he moved back without appearing to decide to do it. "This conversation is finished. Whatever Reverend Boone told you to say to me, you've said it. Now go." He went. Not fast, but he went. Abby stood with the copied document in her hand for 30 seconds. Then she folded it carefully and put it in her dress pocket. Evidence was evidence. You did not throw it away because it made you angry. She walked around to the back of the house. Her mother had kept a spare key beneath the third flagstone to the left of the back door under a flat chip of red sandstone that looked like every other flat chip of red sandstone unless you knew to count. Abby crouched down, felt the familiar edges lifted it. The key was there, cold and small in her palm. She let herself in. The house smelled like her mother. Lavender and dust, and something faintly medicinal from the last weeks of illness. The kitchen was exactly as Abby had left it after Eleanor died, the teacup still on the counter, the window still propped open with the broken wooden ruler. Then she heard it. A sound from the bedroom. Not footsteps exactly. More like a careful shifting of weight and then something wooden being pried up slowly with effort. Abby did not hesitate. She crossed the kitchen and pushed open the bedroom door. A man was crouched in the middle of the floor with a short iron bar in his hand, and 3 of the floorboards beside the bed had already been lifted and set aside. He was not a man she recognized. Heavy through the shoulders, wearing working clothes, face beaded with sweat from the effort and the heat. He looked up at her, and for one moment neither of them moved. Then he said, "You can't be in here. This is church property now." "Put the bar down," Abby said. He stood instead. He was taller than her by 6 inches and broad across the chest, and he crossed his arms with the iron bar still in one fist, clearly deciding that a woman her size at a funeral that morning alone in the house was not a problem he needed to worry about. He was wrong about that. "I'm going to need you to step away from whatever you're looking for," Abby said. Her voice had gone quiet. People who knew her understood that was the moment to pay attention. "And then I'm going to need you to leave. And if you do those 2 things right now, I will not walk to Sheriff Denton's office this evening and tell him I found a man breaking up the floor of a dead woman's house on the afternoon of her funeral." The man's jaw tightened. "And if you don't," she continued, "I will walk to that office, and I will use every word I know, and I know quite a few, and I will also show him that transfer document with the forged signature, which I am currently carrying in my pocket. So the question you need to answer is how much Reverend Boone is actually paying you, and whether it is enough for what comes next." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he put the iron bar on the floor, picked up his jacket from the bed, and walked past her out of the room. She heard the back door open and close. She listened until his footsteps were gone. Then she turned and looked at what he had started. 3 boards were up. Beneath them she could see the dark space between the floor and the earth below the ordinary crawl space any old house had, full of dirt and shadow and the smell of cool underground air that was almost a relief after the July heat. But there was something else. A handle. Flush with a square wooden frame, cut carefully into the subfloor, almost invisible when the boards were in place. A hatch, small, maybe 2 feet square, with a simple iron ring set into it. Abby stared at it. She had grown up in this house. She had played in this room. She had sat on this floor beside her mother's bed through 3 separate winters of illness and 1 summer of grief after Eleanor's own mother passed. She had never known this was here. She pulled the hatch open. The sound rose up immediately, soft, steady, unmistakable. Moving water. Not dripping, not still. Running water deep beneath the ground, somewhere below the dark ladder, she could now see descending into cool blackness. And beside the hatch, resting in a shallow wooden box that had been sitting in that crawl space long enough that the sides had darkened with age, there were 3 things. A folded letter sealed with plain wax. A document much older than the forged transfer with the kind of formal language and courthouse seal that meant it had real weight. and a small brass key on a leather cord. Abby sat down on the floorboards beside the open hatch and listened to the water for a moment. Then she broke the wax seal and read her mother's letter. It took her 3 readings to fully understand what Eleanor Whitmore had spent 31 years building underneath the floor of a house the town had never thought to take seriously. The letter was dated 4 months before Eleanor's death, written in the wide, pressing cursive that was unmistakably hers tremor, and all the letters unsteady, but the words entirely clear. My Abby, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and they have already started moving. I am sorry I did not tell you sooner. I told myself it was to protect you. The truth is, I was afraid you would think less of me for the secrets. I should have trusted you with all of it years ago. The house is not just a house. It never was. Beneath the floor, beneath the ladder, there is a spring. It runs north to south under the valley. I had it assessed by a water surveyor in 1861, a man from Albuquerque who swore to silence for $20 and kept his word. It is the only spring in this county that runs year-round. Everything else, the wells, the town trough, Boone's church cistern, they all dry by August in a bad summer. The spring beneath this house does not. Whoever controls this water controls Red Willow Creek. I understood that before Boone did. That is the only reason I am still ahead of him. The deed in the box is real. I had it drawn up by a circuit judge in 1863 and registered under trust law so that no single person can own it outright. It belongs to the women of this valley, 12 of them. Their names are in the trust document, and it is to be held by whoever I name as steward. I am naming you. The cellar below the ladder is not only a spring. For 11 years it has been a shelter. Women who needed to disappear for a night, a week, a month. Women running from husbands, from debt, from situations. The law in this territory does not protect them from. They have come through the back door of this house and gone down that ladder. Martha Bell knows. She has sent them to me. There are women alive in this valley because of what we built under the ground where no one thought to look. Boone knows the spring exists. He does not know about the trust or the shelter. He has been trying to acquire this property legally for 6 years, and he has run out of patience. The transfer document you may find posted on the door is not valid. My signature on it is a forgery. I wrote this letter and sealed it early because I knew he would move quickly after I was gone. The deed must be authenticated by Judge Constance Vale. Her circuit takes her through Millhaven every 3rd month. You will need to reach her before Boone's men reach the county clerk. You are the only person I trust with this. Not because the others are not good women, because you are the only one I raised to know the difference between a locked door and a wall. A locked door opens. I love you, my girl. Do not be afraid of your own size. You are exactly as big as this work requires. Mama. Abby read the last line twice. She folded the letter carefully along its original creases. She put it in the box with the deed and the brass key. She closed the hatch over the spring and sat with her back against the bed frame and looked at the lifted floorboards and let herself be still for exactly 60 seconds. Then she stood up. She heard the creak of the front porch steps, the sound of a man's careful, deliberate weight. She picked up the box, held it under one arm, and turned toward the bedroom doorway. Reverend Silas Boone stood in the hall. He was a tall man, lean through the chest with silver hair that he kept neat under a good black hat. He wore his clerical collar even in the July heat, which Abby had always thought said something about him that he preferred to look like authority in the moments when he was doing things authority would not approve of. He looked at her. He looked at the box. He looked at the lifted floorboards. His expression did not change. That was the part that frightened her most. Miss Whitmore, he said. His voice was exactly as it had been at the graveside. Practiced, steady, filled with the particular warmth of a man who had learned to use warmth as a tool. I think we need to have a conversation. Abby did not move. She held the box tighter. I think, she said carefully, that we do not. Boone tilted his head slightly. His eyes moved to the box again and then back to her face. Your mother was a complicated woman. I respected her, truly. But there are some matters she left unresolved that are going to cause difficulty for a great many people in this town, if they aren't handled quietly and with, "I found the deed," Abby said. The warmth in his expression did not disappear. It shifted, became something careful, and still the way a man's face goes when he is recalculating. "Is that so?" he said. "It is so." She took one step toward the doorway. He did not move from it. "And I intend to take it to Judge Vale and have it authenticated, which my mother's letter instructs me to do, which the trust law of this territory gives me every right to do." Another step. "So, if you have something you want to say to me, Reverend, say it fast, because I am leaving this house in approximately 30 seconds, and I will not be leaving the box behind." Boone looked at her for a long moment. "You look very much like her," he said finally. "Your mother. When she was your age, she was formidable. I always found that quality in her difficult to manage." "I imagine you did," Abby said. "I would like to suggest," he continued as if she had not spoken, "that you think carefully before you take a document you don't fully understand to a judge who isn't in this county. You are grieving. You are alone. You are—" He paused and let his eyes travel over her, once in that particular way men used to reduce a woman to her body, caring a great deal right now. Grief does things to a person's judgment. The 30 seconds had passed. Abby walked forward. Boone did not step aside immediately. He let her get within arm's reach before he moved, and he moved slowly, which was meant to make her feel like she was passing with his permission. She walked past him without looking back, down the hall, through the kitchen, out the back door, the one with the key still in it, which she pocketed. She did not run. Running would have told him she was afraid. She walked fast. The box held firm under her arm. Her feet still blistered from the funeral, the July heat pressing down on her like a hand. And she did not slow down until she had turned 2 corners, and the church steeple was no longer visible over the rooftops, and Martha Bell's Inn was 3 blocks ahead of her at the end of the street. She did not look back. She did not need to. She already knew he was watching. Martha Bell had the back door open before Abby's fist completed the second knock. She took one look at the box, one look at Abby's face, and she stepped aside without saying a word, which told Abby everything she needed to know about how much Martha already understood. Abby came in. Martha dropped the latch, pulled the curtain, turned the small lamp down to its lowest setting. "He was there," Abby said. "Boone, standing in the hallway when I came out of the bedroom. He saw the box." "How long did he hold you?" "He didn't hold me. I walked past him." Martha stared at her for a half-second. Then something moved across her face, not quite a smile, but close to one. "Your mother used to do that," she said. "Walk through a room like a wall wasn't there." She pulled a chair out from the table. "Sit down, Abby. There's a great deal I should have told you years ago." Abby sat. She kept the box on her lap. Martha sat across from her, folded her hands on the table, and looked at the woman Eleanor Whitmore had raised with the steady attention of someone who had been waiting a long time to have this particular conversation. "How long have you known?" Abby asked. "Since the beginning," Martha said. "Spring of 1862. Your mother walked into this kitchen with a water surveyor's report rolled under her arm and told me exactly what she had under that house and exactly what she intended to do about it." She paused. "She didn't ask my opinion. She laid the plan out and asked if I was in. And you said yes." Before she finished the sentence, Abby opened the box. She laid the deed on the table between them. Martha looked at it the way you look at something you helped build a long time ago, with recognition and with grief, and with a particular kind of pride that has nowhere comfortable to put itself. 11 years, Martha said quietly. 31 women I know of. Probably more your mother never told me about directly. Some stayed a single night. Some stayed 3 months. She touched the edge of the deed without picking it up. She kept no written names anywhere visible. Everything is in the trust document. 12 women named as legal co-holders of the water rights. Not charity cases, not victims, legal co-holders. So that if anything happened to her, no single man could claim there was nobody left to contest it. Abby looked at the deed. Who's on the list? I am, Martha said. Dr. Hale's widow, Nora Finch from the laundry on 2nd Street. She paused. Iris Cobb. The name landed differently than the others. Iris Cobb, Abby said, whose husband broke her hand twice, and her collarbone once. Martha said, her voice staying flat and factual in the way of someone who has learned that anger needs to be stored carefully or it burns through everything. She stayed in that cellar for 3 weeks in the winter of '69. Eleanor fed her and kept her warm and helped her write a letter to her sister in Colorado. Iris went back in the end. She had children she wouldn't leave. Martha lifted her eyes to Abby's. But she has never once forgotten what your mother built for her. Abby pressed both hands flat on the table. Martha, does Boone know about the shelter? Martha didn't answer immediately. Martha, I don't know the full shape of what he knows, she said carefully. But for the last 2 weeks he's had a man watching this in, not obviously. Sitting across the street changing positions, different men on different days. I noticed on the 4th day. She met Abby's eyes without flinching. And last week he sent his clerk, that Pruitt boy, to ask Nora Finch if she had ever conducted any business with your mother. Casual, friendly. Nora told him she bought soap from Eleanor once. A pause. She came straight to me afterward, and she was shaking. He's building a list, Abby said. The thought arrived fully formed and cold. He already knows names. He's confirming them. That's what I believe, yes. If he gets those names with documentation... Abby stopped. She thought about it all the way through. He doesn't just get the house. He doesn't even primarily want the water. He gets leverage over every woman on that trust. He can go to their families, their husbands, their employers. He can say these women participated in an unsanctioned shelter, that they hid from their legal obligations, that they... She stopped again because the full weight of it was considerable. I know what he can do, Martha said quietly. I have thought about very little else for 3 weeks. The front porch steps creaked. 3 knocks, hard, the kind that announces authority before the mouth has the chance to. Both women went still. Martha stood up without rushing. Back room, she said low and clear. Take the box. I'm not going to hide in a... Abby! Martha's voice didn't rise. It compressed. This is not hiding. This is strategy. Go. Abby went. She pressed herself against the wall of the narrow storage room, with the box held flat against her chest, and left the door open just enough. She heard Martha cross the front room. The latch lifted. Sheriff Denton. Martha's voice warm, easy, the professional warmth of a woman who had run a public house for 15 years. Awful hot to be making social calls. Afternoon, Martha. Tom Denton. Abby had known his voice since she was 9 years old. Slow and careful, like a man who had learned early that words were a resource to be managed. I'm looking for Abigail Whitmore. You seen her? I saw her at the burial this morning, same as half of Red Willow Creek, Martha said. Something wrong? Got a trespassing complaint. Church property on Elm Street. The property that transferred 12 days ago while Eleanor Whitmore was still alive and had told her daughter absolutely nothing about giving away the house she built with 30 years of savings, Martha said, with the pleasant tone of someone discussing the weather. That property. A silence. Then Martha, I just work with what's filed. And what's filed is a document with a forged signature, which I know because I have known Eleanor Whitmore's handwriting for 11 years. And her right hand had a tremor she got from the fever of '68 that shows up in every letter she ever wrote. Martha's voice stayed perfectly level. But you'd know that too, Tom, if you'd looked at it. Another silence. Longer. There's also a warrant to retrieve any property removed from the premises. Signed by which judge? Martha asked. County judge, signed this morning. This morning, Martha repeated. Eleanor was buried 3 hours ago, and there's already a warrant. A pause. I'll pass along your message if I see her. The door closed. Martha stood at the window. 1 minute. 2. Then, come out. Abby came out. He'll have a man on the front by nightfall, Martha said. Possibly the back alley already. You need to move. Abby was already thinking. The county clerk's office. Millhaven. The original deed filing has to be on record there. If the county record confirms the trust predates Boone's transfer by 10 years, it changes the legal weight of everything. She picked up the box. How far? 40 minutes on a horse. Does he have one? Martha looked at her with a slight dry expression. I have one. His name is August, and he has opinions, but he goes. They went out through the kitchen. Martha checked the alley first, then waved her through. The roan gelding in the small stable behind the inn looked at Abby with the specific mild contempt of a horse who had seen a great deal and been impressed by very little of it. She had not ridden seriously in 2 years. She knew what mounting was going to look like. She did it anyway, both hands on the saddle horn weight thrown up with the deliberate, ungraceful force of a woman who understood the difference between looking dignified and getting the job done. She got up on the second try. 2 boys on the neighboring fence were watching. One of them laughed the slow, deliberate kind borrowed from some adult who'd taught it to him. Abby gathered the reins and turned August to face the street. She looked at the boy directly. You got somewhere to be, she said. He didn't answer. Then sit quiet, she said, and rode. The road north ran through dry country and dead heat. August was difficult for the first 10 minutes, drifting left, slowing when she needed pace, expressing his displeasure through a constant mild resistance that she matched with steady pressure and no discussion. Eventually, he made the decision that cooperation was marginally less effort than argument, and they reached something close to an understanding. She rode and she thought. Boone had moved the day Eleanor died. Not the day after, not the week after, the day of. A forged transfer filed 3 days before death, a warrant ready by the morning of the funeral, a man in the house before the grave was even settled. That was not opportunism. That was preparation over months, maybe years. Eleanor had said in her letter that Boone had been trying to acquire the property legally for 6 years and had run out of patience. 6 years of patience was not nothing. It meant he believed in the prize. It meant the spring and the names and the water and the leverage, all of it had been the plan long enough that it had become the center of how he thought about Red Willow Creek. She rode harder. Harlan Marsh looked up from his desk when she walked through his door, and his expression did something complicated. A quick involuntary flash of something like alarm, immediately smoothed into professional neutrality. He was a small, precise man, who had spent his career making sure he was never in the direct path of anyone's conflict, and something in his face told her that he already knew today was not going to cooperate with that preference. Miss Whitmore, he said. I wasn't expecting. The Whitmore property on Elm Street, Abby said. She set the box on his counter. There's a deed registered in trust from 1863 circuit judge named Harrington. I need to see the original filing record. Marsh moved to the filing cabinet without argument. That was good. His hands moved through the W drawer with practiced speed. Then they slowed. Then they stopped. It's not here, he said. The words were quiet, almost confused, like a man who had walked into a room and found the furniture arranged differently than he'd left it. It was here Tuesday morning, he said. He was still looking at the drawer. I filed the church transfer receipt Tuesday, and the original deed it should be right behind the... He pulled 2 folders, checked them, put them back. Miss Whitmore, it's not here. Someone removed it, Abby said. Between Tuesday morning and right now, who has access to this cabinet? I do, the deputy clerk, and the office is locked when I'm not in it. He turned and looked at her with the expression of a man who was understanding something he did not want to understand. Someone was in here this morning when I went to the bank. 20 minutes. The deputy said a man from the church office came by to collect a receipt. He took the filing, Abby said. I can't prove. I can. She pulled the forged transfer document from the box and held it up. This is the document Boone filed. This is my mother's signature at the bottom, except it isn't because my mother had a right-hand tremor since 1868, and there is no tremor here. Someone copied her signature. And now, the original deed that would prove his transfer is fraudulent has gone missing from your cabinet on the same morning a church representative visited your office. She set the document on the counter between them. Mr. Marsh, this is not a property dispute. This is fraud against a public record. Marsh looked at the document. He looked at Abby. He looked at the document again. Miss Whitmore, he said in the careful, measured voice of a man choosing his words with full awareness of their weight. I received a telegraph this morning, before the bank, from Boone's attorney. She waited. It instructed me to hold any documents related to the Whitmore property pending the church's formal claim review. He paused. I want to be clear that I was told to hold them, not to remove them. And the attorney who sent that telegraph knew the original filing would be gone before I arrived, Abby said. Because it was already gone. The silence had a particular quality. The kind that forms when two people reach the same conclusion at the same moment, and neither of them is happy about it. There's something else, Marsh said. His voice changed, got quieter and more careful in a way that made the back of Abby's neck tighten. The telegraph also referenced a second filing, a petition. He moved to a different drawer. He took out a single folded sheet and set it on the counter. Submitted this morning by Boone's attorney, to the county office. Abby unfolded it. She read it once fast. Then she read it again slowly. It was a petition to decommission and permanently seal an unlicensed underground structure on the Elm Street property. It cited safety concerns, unauthorized use. And here was the line that made everything go cold. It cited the participation of multiple named residents of Red Willow Creek in the illegal operation of a clandestine gathering space in violation of county ordinance. Multiple named residents. He has names, Abby said. Her voice came out flat. He already has them. He didn't need the trust document. He built his own list. The petition lists 7 women by name, Marsh said quietly. I recognized most of them. 7 out of 12. If this petition is processed, Abby said, the cellar gets sealed. The names become part of a public legal record, and every woman on that list is exposed to whatever their husbands or employers or families want to do with the information. She looked at Marsh directly. How long before it processes? 3 days, possibly 4. And the property review? 10 days. 10 days to authenticate the deed. 3 days before the names went into a public legal record. She was standing in a clerk's office with a funeral dress still damp on her back, and the math was not in her favor. She thought about Iris Cobb. Broken hand, broken collarbone. A husband who had never spent a night in jail for any of it. If Frank Cobb saw his wife's name on a county petition stating she had participated in an unlicensed shelter, I need to reach Judge Constance Vale, Abby said, before that petition processes and before the 10-day review closes. Where is she? Marsh moved to his calendar. His finger traced down the columns. She completed her Millhaven circuit 3 weeks ago. Next stop is Canaan Flat 4 days from now. After that, Redstone. Canaan Flat, Abby said. How far? 6 hours north. Straight road. 4 days to cover 6 hours of road. That part was manageable. What was not manageable was leaving Red Willow Creek for 4 days with the cellar still open, and 7 names on a petition that had a 3-day clock. Mr. Marsh, she said, I need you to write down signed and dated that the original deed filing was present in your cabinet on Tuesday morning and is missing now, and that you received a telegraph from Boone's attorney on the same morning a church representative accessed your office. Marsh looked at his desk. He looked at the cabinet. He looked at the petition still lying open on the counter. What you're asking me, he said slowly, is to put my name on a document that directly contradicts the position of the First Church of Red Willow Creek and their attorney. What I'm asking you, Abby said, is to tell the truth about what you saw and what is missing from a public record that is your legal responsibility to maintain. She didn't move. She didn't raise her voice. Mr. Marsh, my mother built something in this county that helped 31 women survive circumstances the law of this territory did not protect them from. Boone wants to seal that cellar and use those names against every one of them. You can write 4 sentences right now, and I can take them to a judge who will use them. Or you can decide it isn't worth the trouble. She met his eyes. But you will have to live with whichever one you choose. A long silence. Marsh opened his desk drawer. He took out paper and uncapped his pen and wrote for 3 minutes without stopping. He signed it, dated it, blotted it, slid it across the counter. Abby read it, folded it, put it in the box. "Thank you," she said. "Miss Whitmore." His voice stopped her at the door. "There's one more thing in that petition." He was looking at his desk now, not at her. "It requests an emergency order naming Reverend Boone as temporary custodian of the property pending resolution, which would give him legal access to the house and everything below it before the review is even complete." She turned back fully. "If that order is granted," she said, "he can take whatever is in that cellar. Documents, anything my mother stored down there that isn't already in this box." "Yes," Marsh said. "How long before the emergency custodian order could be granted?" "If a sympathetic judge processes it quickly." Marsh paused. 48 hours. 48 hours. She rode back faster than she had ridden out. August felt the urgency somehow, or he simply preferred going home to going anywhere else, and covered the ground at a pace that had the scrubland passing in a blur, and the wind doing something almost useful against the heat. She rode and she thought, and by the time Red Willow Creek came back into view, she had most of the shape of it. She needed the cellar secured before the 48-hour window closed. She needed the women on that list warned before Boone could reach them individually. She needed to be on the road to Canaan Flat in time to intercept Judge Vale and get the deed authenticated before the 10-day review voided her mother's claim entirely. 3 things. 2 days. 1 woman. She tied August at Martha's post and went through the front door this time. Not the alley. The front door in full view of whoever was watching the street. Let him know she was back. Let him wonder what she'd found. Martha was behind the counter. The inn was quiet, 2 men eating at the far table, neither of them paying obvious attention, which meant they were paying considerable attention. Martha took one look at Abby's face and set down the pot she was holding. "How bad?" she said under her breath. "He has 7 of the 12 names already," Abby said. "Filed a petition to seal the cellar, 48 hours before an emergency custodian order could give him legal access to the property. And the original deed filing has been removed from Marsh's cabinet." Martha's expression didn't crumble. It sharpened, the way a face sharpens when fear converts directly into focus without stopping at panic. "The deed," she said. "I have it. Marsh gave me a written statement about the missing filing. I need Judge Vale to authenticate it, and I have 4 days to reach Canaan Flat to do it." Abby set the box on the counter. "But I can't leave with the cellar unguarded and the women unwarned." "I'll handle the women," Martha said immediately. "Iris Cobb's name is on that petition," Abby said quietly. Martha closed her eyes for a half-second. "Frank Cobb. If he sees her name on a public county record before we can get this deed in front of a judge—" "I'll go to Iris tonight," Martha said, "before anything else." She opened her eyes. "Nora Finch too. The widow Hale. I can reach all 3 before midnight." She looked at Abby steadily. "What about the cellar itself? If Boone gets that custodian order?" The back door opened. Both women turned. Nora Finch stood in the doorway. She was a slight woman in her 40s who ran the laundry on 2nd Street, and she was not the sort of woman who appeared places without reason. Her face said she had a reason tonight that she didn't want to speak out loud. "I'm sorry," she said. She looked at Martha. She looked at Abby. She seemed to register something about the box on the counter, and the expression on both their faces and her own face went from frightened to something more settled. Like a woman recognizing that the thing she feared was already being handled. "Boone's attorney came to my shop today. Not Pruitt, a different man. He told me I was listed as a party to an unlicensed property venture connected to the Whitmore house. He said if I gave a written statement affirming that the church had the right to the property, my name would be removed from the petition." She paused. "He said I had until tomorrow morning." The 2 men at the far table were still eating. Abby looked at Nora. "What did you tell him?" "I told him I needed time to think," Nora said. "And then I came here." Abby picked up the box. She looked at Martha. She looked at Nora Finch's frightened, steady face. "How many of the 12 does he have pressuring right now?" Abby said. "If he went to Nora," Martha said, "he's going to everyone on his list, tonight. 7 names. 7 women who had done nothing wrong except survive something that hurt them. 7 women being told that their survival was a crime that could be made public unless they helped a man steal a dead woman's house." Abby felt the fury move through her. Not the hot, quick kind that made people say things they regretted, but the slow kind, the structural kind, the kind that changes what a person is willing to do and how far they are willing to go to do it. She set both hands on the counter. "All right," she said. "Here is what we are going to do." Martha leaned in. Nora moved closer. The 2 men at the far table kept eating. Outside, Red Willow Creek was settling into the kind of evening that looked peaceful to everyone in it, except the people who knew what was moving underneath. Abby had 4 days to reach a judge, and 48 hours before Boone could walk through that door legally. She had her mother's deed, a clerk's written statement, a woman who ran a laundry and had not given in, and Martha Bell, who had said yes before Eleanor Whitmore even finished asking. She had been underestimated every day of her 29 years by people who looked at her body and decided they already knew everything important. Every single one of them had been wrong, and Silas Boone was going to learn that the hard way. She left before midnight, not because she had slept or rested or done any of the things a body asks for after 4 days without either. She left because the 48-hour window was running and waiting was the one thing she could not afford. Martha pressed food and water into her hands without discussion. Nora Finch had already gone to lock her shop and was sleeping in Eleanor's front room with a lantern burning, keeping the house occupied and visible the way Abby had asked. Iris Cobb had gone home to her children, moving carefully in the dark, in the way of a woman who had learned to be quiet about pain. Caleb Rusk had offered to ride with her. Abby had told him she needed him in Red Willow Creek more than she needed company on the road. He had the badge. He had the standing. If Boone's men tried anything against the house or the women in it before she got back, a deputy who had chosen his side was worth more than anything else she could leave behind. She rode north alone. August was unhappy about the dark and communicated this consistently through his feet. She talked to him anyway, low and steady, the same way she had done on the first ride, because the sound of her own voice kept her from drifting, and August's ears kept moving back toward her when she spoke, which she chose to take as a sign of solidarity between 2 stubborn creatures with no good options. The road was long, and the night was black, and she was very tired. She thought about her mother, not the Eleanor of the last months. The woman shrinking in the bed with the fever working through her, and the tremor in her hand getting worse by the week. She thought about the Eleanor of 20 years earlier, the one who had walked into this same kind of dark with a water surveyor's report and a plan, and the particular brand of courage that does not announce itself, that simply continues. That Eleanor had built something over 31 years with patience and silence, and the knowledge that some things can only survive if nobody important notices them until it is too late to undo them. Boone had noticed too late. He was trying to make up for that now with speed. The first gray light was just beginning when Canaan Flat appeared. She had been riding 5 hours, and her back was one long line of argument, and her feet in the stirrups were numb past the ankle. She found the boarding house where the circuit traveled, found the porch with the clerk already awake with a broom, and dismounted with the particular ungrace of a woman whose body had given its opinion and been overruled. "Judge Vale," Abby said. "I need to see her." The clerk was young, efficient, and trained to manage access to an important woman. "The judge doesn't receive until 8 and I have an authenticated forged property transfer, a missing county deed filing, and a petition that processes in less than 40 hours that will put 7 women's names in a public legal record and give a corrupt reverend ammunition to destroy their lives." She held the box steady against her side. "Whatever you need to hear, I've just said it. Please, go tell her I'm here." He looked at her. He went inside. She stood on that porch and did not sit, because sitting meant stopping, and stopping meant the exhaustion would get traction. She counted her own heartbeats to stay present. She got to 63 before the door opened again. Judge Constance Vale was 60 years old and fully dressed, and the most awake person Abby had encountered in 4 days. She stood in the doorway and looked at this woman who had ridden through the night in a black funeral dress with a wooden box, and eyes that had not closed since a burial, and her expression did not carry pity or surprise. It carried the particular focused attention of someone who had been waiting for a specific kind of problem to arrive and was ready to handle it. "Come in," she said. The sitting room was small and functional. Abby sat. Judge Vale sat across from her and folded her hands and waited with the quality of a woman who had spent her career understanding that letting people talk was more valuable than asking them questions. Abby opened the box and laid everything out. The deed, Eleanor's letter, the forged transfer, Marcia's signed statement about the missing county filing. She did it without narrating, just laid each piece in order and let the documents speak the first part. Then she spoke the second part. She told it clean and fast. The funeral, the lock, the forged signature, the man prying the floor, the hatch, the letter Boone in the hallway. She told it about Martha in the inn, in the sheriff, in the fake warrant. She told it about writing to Marsh, in finding the original filing gone, in Boone's petition, naming 7 women by name. She told it about the 48-hour clock and the 10-day review, and what happened to Iris Cobb's hand, and why Frank Cobb was a man whose wife's name could not appear in a public county record before this was resolved. She said all of it in about 4 minutes, and then she stopped. Judge Vale picked up the deed. She read it fully. She picked up Eleanor's letter. She read that. She held the forged transfer beside the letter and looked at the signatures for a long, quiet moment. Then she set everything down and looked at Abby. "Eleanor Whitmore wrote to me in 1869, she said. Abby went still. She wanted to know whether the trust structure would hold under a legal contest, Vale continued. I told her it would if the deed remained properly filed and authenticated. She wrote to me again 14 months ago. She paused. She told me she believed the challenge was coming. She said she was putting her affairs in order and that her daughter would likely be the one to bring the documents when the time came. She looked at Abby directly. She described you. The room was very quiet. She said you were the most patient person she had ever raised, Vale said, and that patience in her experience was the quality that outlasted everything. Abby looked at the table. She held her own breath for a moment because letting it out would have meant letting something else out with it that she did not have time for right now. The authentication, she said. Yes. Vale was already moving to her desk. She wrote with the efficiency of a woman who had made legal decisions for 20 years and did not deliberate when the facts were clear. The authentication took 3 minutes. The emergency stay freezing all county processes related to the Whitmore property for 30 days took 4 more. She stamped and sealed both. She added a third document Abby had not asked for, a written directive to the county clerk to restore the original deed filing and to preserve all records related to the case under judicial protection. She held out all 3. The stay gives you 30 days, Vale said. I'll come to Red Willow Creek for the formal hearing. 4 days. She looked at Abby steadily. The authenticated deed stops his legal process. It will not stop him personally. Do not mistake one for the other. I don't, Abby said. Your mother was a woman of uncommon courage, Vale said. So are you. Now go. Abby went. She pushed August harder than she had pushed anything in her life, and he gave it to her, whether because he sensed the urgency or because they had reached some understanding in the dark that she did not have language for. The sun climbed, and the heat climbed with it, and she rode through both. She was back in Red Willow Creek before noon. She went directly to the house on Elm Street. The front door was open in a way she had not left it. She walked in without slowing. The bedroom floor was destroyed, not pried carefully the way the first man had done it, torn up. 6 boards pulled and dropped sideways, the hatch hanging open, the ladder descending into the dark below. And down there, visible even from the doorway, the stone wall beside the spring where her mother had stored 2 wooden record boxes empty. The boxes were gone. She stood in the hallway and felt the fury move through her, like something geological. Slow deep, the kind that does not burn out because it is not made of heat but of pressure. She breathed once, twice. Then she moved. Martha Bell was crossing the street at a near run when Abby came out the front door, and behind her came Nora Finch and the widow Hale, and moving carefully but steadily from the far corner, Iris Cobb. And 10 steps behind Iris, walking in from the opposite direction, as if arriving from somewhere he had not intended to be visible, was Deputy Caleb Rusk. He stopped when he saw Abby's face. "The boxes," she said. His jaw tightened. "I moved them," he said. "This morning. 2 of Boone's men came with a paper. They said it was a sheriff's authorization. I helped them carry the boxes out." He stopped, then made himself continue. "I didn't know what was inside." The women had gathered on the porch steps now. Nobody spoke. "And then," Abby said, "Boone's attorney came to find me an hour ago." Rusk's voice was controlled, in the way that voices get when a man is holding something large very carefully. "He thanked me for cooperating. He mentioned my mother by name. Said the boxes contained sensitive names, and that people who helped early would find those names handled with discretion." He looked at Abby. He did not look away. "My mother's name is in one of those boxes." The silence on the porch had a particular density. "She left my father when I was 3, Rusk said. "I never knew the details. She told me years later that someone helped her. She wouldn't say who." His voice was very steady now, steadier than it had been the way a voice gets when a man has finished being ashamed and has moved to the next thing. "I think I know who." Abby looked at him for a long moment. At the badge on his chest. At the face of a man who had understood in the last 2 hours what he had been used for and had made his decision about what came next. "Where are the boxes now?" she said. "Nathaniel Pike's office, 2nd Street. He locked up and sent his clerk home early. I walked past the window 20 minutes ago. The boxes are still inside. He hasn't had time to go through them yet." He paused. "If you move now." "Then let's move," Abby said. Martha caught her arm, not to stop her, to hold steady for 1 second. "Boone knows by now that you rode out last night. He'll be watching Pike's office." "Good," Abby said. "Let him watch." She looked at the women on the steps, 4 of them standing in front of her mother's house in plain daylight, where anyone on the street could see them. The sight of them hit her the same way it had the first time, not as a comfort, but as something with more structural integrity than comfort. Something like foundation. "Stay visible," she said. "Anyone tries to come through that door, you show them this." She pressed the emergency stay into Martha's hands. "Judicial order. They touch that door, they're in contempt of a sitting circuit judge." She turned to Rusk. "Let's go." They walked to Pike's office without running. Running looked like flight. Walking at Rusk's badge-wearing pace looked like authority, which is what they needed it to look like. The man Boone had watching the street was not subtle about it. He was leaning against the wall 20 feet from Pike's door, with his arms crossed, and the specific quality of alertness that comes from trying to look casual while actually watching. He clocked Abby and Rusk coming from half a block. He straightened. "Deputy," he said, stepping into their path. Rusk did not break stride. "Move," he said. "My employer has an interest in." "Your employer can explain that interest to Judge Vale when she arrives in 4 days," Rusk said. "Move." The man moved. Rusk knocked on Pike's door. A pause. Then the sound of someone crossing the floor carefully, which was the sound of someone deciding how to handle whatever was on the other side. Pike opened the door. He was a man of about 45, with the well-pressed look of someone whose whole professional identity depended on appearing in control of his circumstances. That appearance was under considerable strain right now. "Deputy Rusk," he said. His eyes went to Abby and came back to Rusk. "I wasn't informed of any chain of custody verification," Rusk said. "Items removed from the Whitmore property this morning under a contested authorization. I need to see them." The authorization was properly issued. The sheriff's office has no standing to authorize a property seizure on a contested estate during an active judicial hold, Abby said. She held up the emergency stay, which has been in place since 7:30 this morning, issued by Judge Constance Vale in Canaan Flat. She let him read the seal. She did not hand it to him. The items were removed approximately 6 hours after the stay went into effect, which means the seizure is invalid. I'm here for the boxes. Pike looked at the document. His expression did not crumble. It reorganized the way she had seen Boone's face reorganize in the hallway, except that Pike was a lawyer and not a preacher, and what it reorganized into was not threat, but calculation. He was calculating whether fighting this right now cost him more than letting it go and regrouping later. The boxes are in the back room, he said. Deputy Rusk will retrieve them, Abby said. You will remain in my line of sight while he does. Rusk went through. He was back in 2 minutes with both boxes stacked in his arms, lids still latched. He set them on Pike's desk, and Abby checked both latches sealed. Whatever her mother had documented in there had not been read yet. They had moved fast enough by a margin that was too narrow to think about. She picked up both boxes. They were heavy enough to make her arms feel the previous 5 days in every muscle. She picked them up anyway. Mr. Pike, she said at the door. When you speak to Reverend Boone today, please inform him that the deed has been authenticated. The stay is in effect for 30 days, and Judge Vale will be in Red Willow Creek in 4 days for the formal hearing. She looked at him evenly. He is welcome to contest the judicial review through proper legal channels. He is not welcome in my mother's house. She walked out with Rusk at her side and did not look back. The formal hearing came on the 4th day as promised, and Judge Constance Vale rode into Red Willow Creek with the quiet authority of a woman who understood that her presence in a room changed the geometry of it. She set up in the county hall, not the church which Boone had apparently suggested, and which Vale had apparently declined without explanation. Boone arrived with Pike and 3 members of his church board, and the composed certainty of a man who believed that the legal ground under his feet was solid. He had spent 4 days working his angles, speaking to county officials. Abby didn't know, sending Pruitt to visit 2 of the trust women with revised offers. Abby only heard about afterward filing a counter-motion through Pike that challenged Vale's jurisdiction on a technical point that was serious enough to require a response. Abby had spent 4 days preparing one. She had Marcia's signed statement confirming the deed was present on Tuesday and missing by Thursday. She had the forged transfer document with the traceable absence of her mother's tremor. She had the authenticated trust deed registered 10 years before Boone's claim. She had the emergency stay that had been violated by the morning seizure of the record boxes. She had Caleb Rusk, who sat in the county hall in his deputy's badge and looked at no one in particular with the expression of a man who had already made peace with what testifying would cost him professionally. And she had Nathaniel Pike. That was the thing none of them had anticipated. Halfway through the hearing, after Marsh had given his statement and Rusk had given his, and the forged signature had been compared publicly against Eleanor's authenticated letters with their unmistakable tremor. Nathaniel Pike stood up. Boone looked at him. Pike did not look back. Your Honor, Pike said, I have documentation I believe is relevant to the court's understanding of Reverend Boone's land acquisition activities in this county. He reached into his jacket. Over a period of 15 years. The room went very still. Boone said quietly and precisely, Nathaniel. I have prepared a statement, Pike said to Vale, and the corresponding records. I would like to enter them as evidence. Abby looked at Boone's face. She had wondered since the hallway on the day of the funeral what was underneath the practiced warmth. She had wondered what Boone looked like when the calculation stopped working and there was nothing left below it. Now she saw it. It was not dramatic. It was small. A compression around the eyes. A stillness in the jaw. The expression of a man watching something he built over 15 years slide from under him and understanding in real time that there is no recovering from the specific kind of damage a loyal lawyer does when he decides to stop being loyal. Vale accepted Pike's documentation. She reviewed it for 20 minutes with the room in total silence. Then she looked up and delivered her ruling with the same efficiency she had used to write the stay in Canaan Flat clearly without theater, with the particular directness of someone who had decided what the truth was and saw no reason to dress it in anything extra. Boone's transfer was fraudulent. The signature was confirmed as forged against authenticated correspondence. The removal of the county filing constituted tampering with a public record. The seizure of the property boxes violated the judicial stay and constituted contempt. The trust deed, registered 1863, predated the church's claim by a decade and had legal standing under territorial trust law. The petition to seal the cellar was dismissed. The emergency custodian application was denied. Abby Whitmore was named legal steward of the Whitmore property and the Women's Trust effective immediately for as long as she chose to serve. Boone did not speak during any of this. He sat with his hands folded on the table, and his face in the configuration she now recognized as his real face, the one beneath the warmth and the patience and the 6 years of careful strategy. It was the face of a man who had believed for a very long time that the world organized itself according to his preferences. Learning otherwise had not made him humble. It had made him quiet in a way that was not the same thing. He left the county hall before the ruling was formally entered. Pike stayed and answered Vale's questions for another hour. Pruitt sat in the back row by himself and stared at the floor. Abby walked out into the afternoon. Martha was waiting on the steps. Nora Finch was there. The widow Hale. Iris Cobb, who had been in that county hall for the full hearing and had not flinched once. Rusk was behind them, a little apart in the manner of a man understanding he was present at the edge of something he had been permitted into, but that belonged to these women in a way it would never entirely belong to him. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Martha put her hand on Abby's arm and held it there. "Your mother," she said, and could not immediately continue. She tried again. She would have... She stopped. "I know," Abby said. She did know. Eleanor would not have cried. Eleanor would have said something practical about the record boxes needing to be properly inventoried and stored, and she would have already been thinking about the next thing, and somewhere underneath all of that practicality would have been the thing she showed only in certain letters to judges she trusted and in certain sentences she wrote to daughters she knew would read them after she was gone. "You are exactly as big as this work requires." Abby looked at the house at the end of the street, the blue-shuttered house her mother had kept for 31 years. The house that had a locked door and a hidden spring and a ladder going down into the dark and 31 women's worth of survival built into its bones. Boone had lost the law today. She could feel, even standing here in the relief of it, that he had not lost everything. A man like that does not accept a courtroom ruling the way a fair man accepts a fair loss. He accepts it the way water accepts a new channel. He finds another direction. He still had the pulpit. He still had the loyalty of certain men in this town who had organized their lives around his version of things. He still had time and wounded pride, and the specific dangerous quality of a man who has been very patient for a very long time, and had that patience publicly broken. She knew all of that. She was not afraid of it. She had her mother's deed and a judge's ruling, and a deputy who had chosen the right side, and 4 women standing on steps in broad daylight, and a cellar with clean water running through it that had never once gone dry. She was exactly as big as what came next, and she was ready. The Sunday sermon came 3 days after the ruling. Abby knew it was coming. She had known since she watched Boone walk out of the county hall with his hands still folded and his face in that small compressed configuration. Men like Boone did not accept courtrooms as final verdicts. They accepted them as interruptions. And then they went back to the pulpit, which was the one room in Red Willow Creek where no judge's ruling could follow him. She heard about it secondhand. She had not attended. Neither had Martha or Nora or the widow Hale. But Caleb Rusk sat in the back pew the way he had started doing most Sundays, not out of faith exactly, but out of the professional habit of watching, and he came to the house on Elm Street that afternoon and told her what had been said. Boone had not mentioned Abby by name. He was too careful for that. He had spoken instead about women who had been led astray by pride, about houses that harbored darkness under the guise of charity, about the particular danger of those who rejected the proper authority of God and law and community in favor of their own ungoverned judgment. He had said these things in his best voice, the rolling, practiced one that filled rooms and made men feel righteous about conclusions they had already reached. "How many people were there?" Abby asked. "Full house," Rusk said. He paused. "But 2 families walked out before it was over. The Perkins and old Will Addison just stood up and left." Abby absorbed that. 2 families, out of a full house. It was not a tide, but it was a crack. "How did he look?" she asked. Rusk thought about it. "Like a man who knows the words aren't landing the same way they used to," he said, "and doesn't know yet what to do about it." That was what she needed to understand about Boone's power. It had never been legal. The deed, the forged signature, the county petition, those were tools, not foundations. His foundation was the belief of people who trusted him with their Sundays and their money and their idea of what this town should be. That foundation had a crack in it now. It was not gone, but it had a crack. She went back to the house and she got to work. The first week after the ruling, she cleaned the cellar, not because it needed cleaning urgently, because the act of cleaning it, going down the ladder herself, pulling the dust and debris from 11 years of intermittent use, washing the stone walls, checking the spring, rehanging the lamp hooks her mother had installed and which were still sound, was the act of making it ready. Of saying, without saying it aloud, that what her mother had built down here was not finished. It was just beginning its next chapter. Martha helped. So did Nora. The widow Hale sent her hired man with timber to rebuild the ladder properly, the old rungs having grown soft with age. Iris Cobb came on the 3rd day and did not say why she had come. She simply rolled up her sleeves and worked alongside the others until the job was done. On the 5th evening, there was a knock at the back door. Abby opened it. A woman she barely recognized stood there. Her name was Lucy Pratt, and she was 23 years old, and she had one small bag and a bruise along her jawline that she had made some effort to conceal and had not succeeded. She was the wife of one of Boone's deacons. She looked at Abby with the expression of someone who had walked a long distance to stand in front of a door and was no longer entirely sure they had the right to knock on it. "I heard," she said and stopped. "I heard that there was a place—" "Come in," Abby said. Lucy Pratt came in. She was the first. She was not the last. The second came 4 days later. A woman from the edge of town that Abby did not know personally, sent by someone who knew someone who had heard that the door on Elm Street opened when you knocked on it after dark. Then a third. Then 11 days after the hearing on a Monday night, when the town had gone quiet, and the air had dropped enough that it almost felt like summer was considering an exit, Iris Cobb appeared at the back door. She had one bag. Her left hand, the one with the fingers that didn't straighten fully, was held against her side. She looked at Abby and did not explain anything because she did not need to. "Come in." Abby said the same 2 words she had said to Lucy Pratt. The same 2 words she was beginning to understand were the most important words the house knew. Iris came in. She stood in the kitchen and looked around it with the expression of a woman who has been in a particular darkness for so long that ordinary lamplight requires a moment of adjustment. "My children," she said. "We'll talk about your children," Abby said. "Sit down first." Iris sat. Abby put food in front of her and sat across from her, and they talked for a long time in the way of women who understand that the practical conversation and the real conversation are the same conversation when you do them right. Iris's sister in Colorado had written back. Iris had a plan, a real one, not the vague wish of a woman with nowhere to go, but an actual direction that needed 2 weeks and some help to become real. Abby had 2 weeks. She had the cellar. She had the spring that never dried. She had her mother's voice in her head saying, "The door opens." The door stayed open. Boone noticed. Of course he noticed. A man who had spent 6 years watching this house could not fail to notice when it came to life. The lights in the evenings. The women coming and going at odd hours. the small garden that Nora had planted along the south wall because she said Eleanor would have wanted it, and she was right. He tried taxes first. A county assessor appeared at Abby's door 2 weeks after the ruling with a revised property assessment that had somehow tripled the taxable value of the Elm Street property based on a reclassification of the underground spring as a commercial water resource. Abby handed him the trust deed, which contained a specific provision for tax exemption on properties held in community trust for charitable purposes, registered under the original 1863 filing. She had found it on her fourth reading of the document. She had made 3 copies and given one each to Martha Rusk and Marsh at the clerk's office. The assessor left. The tax bill did not come back. Boone tried complaints next. 2 letters filed with the county citing the house as an unlicensed lodging establishment operating without proper commercial permits. Abby responded in writing through Marsh, citing the trust's registered charitable status and requesting a formal definition of which county ordinance a privately owned charitable property was violating by providing temporary shelter to women in need. The county office did not respond, which was its own kind of answer. Then came the rumors. This was harder. Rumors did not have a mailing address. They moved through the dry goods store and the saloon and the spaces between church pews on Sunday morning, and they said things about the house on Elm Street that were designed to make decent people feel that keeping their distance was the respectable choice. They said the women there were immoral. They said strange men visited at night. They said Abby Whitmore had always been odd, even as a child. Too big, too quiet, too sure of herself for a woman without a husband to justify the confidence. Abby heard the rumors through Martha, who heard them through Nora, who heard them through the customers at her laundry. She did not respond to them directly. Responding to rumors gave them substance. Instead, she did what her mother had done for 31 years. She kept the lamp burning. She kept the door opening. She kept her receipts and her documents and her witnesses in order, and she let the work be visible. One morning she walked to the dry goods store for supplies carrying her list, and the 2 men by the counter went quiet when she came in, and the woman behind them looked at the floor, and the clerk served her with the particular polite speed of someone trying to make an interaction conclude before it became uncomfortable. Abby bought her supplies and thanked him by name, and walked out without hurrying. She did not look at the ground. She had not looked at the ground in 31 years of being looked at sideways, and she was not starting now. It was coming out of the dry goods store that she found Pruitt waiting by August's post. Boone's clerk looked younger than she remembered him, which was probably because he looked frightened, and fear made people look their real age instead of the performed one. He held his hat in both hands. "Miss Whitmore," he said. "He wants to meet with you." Abby untied August's lead. "Does he?" "He believes there may be a compromise available that—" "There isn't," she said. "Miss Whitmore." Pruitt's voice shifted. Some of the scripted quality went out of it, and what was underneath was something more genuine and less comfortable. He was a young man who had been carrying Boone's leather satchels and delivering Boone's documents and saying Boone's words for long enough that he had probably forgotten which thoughts were his own. "He's going to try to have the trust declared invalid on a procedural technicality. There's a circuit lawyer coming from Santa Fe next week. He found a clause in the territorial code about trust witnesses." Abby looked at him. Pruitt looked back with the expression of a man who has just done something he wasn't supposed to do and is not certain yet how he feels about it. "Why are you telling me this?" she said. He was quiet for a moment. "My sister's name is in one of those boxes," he said. "The ones from the cellar. She came to your mother in '68. He looked at his hat. "I didn't know until the hearing, when Rusk testified about what was in the boxes and why Boone wanted them." He looked up. "I've been working for him for 4 years." Abby studied him. "The procedural challenge," she said. "What specifically?" "The trust requires 2 named witnesses to the original signing. Only one is listed in the surviving documentation. He believes the second witness can be declared invalid if the witness can't be located to verify." "Who is the second witness?" Pruitt reached into his jacket. He pulled out a folded paper and held it out. "I looked through the church records last night. There's a letter of correspondence from 1863. The second witness was a man named Samuel Cord, who was a circuit preacher in this county until 1871. He retired to Albuquerque. He held the paper steady. That's his last recorded address. Abby took the paper. She unfolded it. Samuel Cord, 14 Rafter Street, Albuquerque. Retired. Alive presumably as of 1871. You understand what this does to your position with Boone? She said. Yes, ma'am, Pruitt said. You understand he will know you came to me. Yes, ma'am. And you came anyway. He put his hat back on. My sister was 17 years old in '68, he said simply. She needed help. Your mother gave it to her. I spent 4 years helping the man who wanted to destroy what your mother built. He looked down the street toward the church steeple. That's enough of that. Abby looked at the address in her hand. A second witness alive in Albuquerque. If she could get a deposition from Samuel Cord before Boone's Santa Fe lawyer arrived, the procedural challenge died before it started. She had enough days. Barely. She had been saying barely a great deal lately. She was beginning to think barely was just another word for enough. She was 6 steps away from Pruitt when she heard her name. She turned. It was Iris Cobb. Iris, who had been staying in the cellar shelter for 11 days, now sleeping and planning and writing letters to Colorado, and slowly relearning the particular quality of stillness that comes when you are in a place where nobody is going to break something of yours in the night. But Iris was not alone. Behind her stood 2 women. Abby did not recognize, both carrying bags, both with the look of women who had walked a long way on a decision they had made a long time ago, and only recently found the direction for. They came this morning, Iris said, from Flat Rock. They heard there was a door open. Flat Rock was 14 miles south. The word had traveled 14 miles. Abby looked at the 2 women, at their bags, at the specific expression on their faces that she was beginning to know, the way you know a language after you have heard it spoken enough, the combination of fear and relief and the uncertainty of not yet knowing if the relief is real or if there is some new version of the locked door waiting on the other side of this one. Come in, she said. They came in. That evening, Abby sat at her mother's kitchen table with a lamp burning and the sound of the spring running below her through the floor, and she wrote 2 letters. One to a retired circuit preacher in Albuquerque named Samuel Cord, explaining the situation and requesting a written deposition regarding his witnessing of a trust deed in 1863. The other to Judge Vale, informing her of Boone's forthcoming procedural challenge and the new witness evidence she intended to present. She was sealing the second letter when Martha came in from the back and sat down across from her without removing her coat, which meant she was not staying and had something to say quickly. Boone preached again today, Martha said. Not at the church, in the street, outside the dry goods store. Just stood there talking to whoever passed. She paused. Tom Denton watched him do it and didn't say anything. What did he say? That the house is a contamination. That the women in it are lost. That any man in this town who has a wife or daughter who visits here should be asking serious questions about their souls. Martha watched Abby's face. He's losing the formal fight, and he knows it. So he's going back to what has always worked for him. Shame. Abby nodded slowly. How many people stopped to listen? Some. How many walked past? Martha paused. Then, more. More. Not all, but more. Abby sealed both letters. She set them side by side on the table. She put her hands flat on the wood and felt the faint vibration of the spring running underneath the same water that had run under this floor every day of her mother's 31 years. Here indifferent to everything that happened above it. The arguments and the fraud and the forged signatures and the sermons and the rumors just running clean and cold and continuous. There's something else, Martha said. Abby looked at her. A man came to my inn tonight, back door. He left a satchel. Martha set it on the table. It was leather good quality, the kind a professional man carries. He didn't give his name. He said only that the satchel contained 15 years of records and that he was leaving Red Willow Creek tonight. Abby looked at the satchel. She did not need to open it to know whose it was. She recognized the quality of the leather because she had seen it carried into and out of a certain office on 2nd Street on the afternoon she went there to retrieve her mother's record boxes. Nathaniel Pike had testified against his client at the hearing. He had submitted documents and answered a judge's questions for an hour, and had done it with the deliberate efficiency of a man who had already made his peace with what came next. But apparently, there was one more thing he had held back. One more piece of 15 years of Boone's history that he had not laid on the table in the county hall, and that he was now on his way out of town, choosing to leave at Martha Bell's back door, rather than take with him into whatever life came next. Abby opened the satchel. She read for 40 minutes without stopping. When she finished, she sat very still for a moment with the papers in her hands and the lamp burning and the spring running under the floor. The Red Willow Creek property. The 2 ranches on the North Road. The Mercy Springs land that had supposedly been donated by a widow who, according to these letters, had not donated it voluntarily. The water rights. The county official who had been receiving regular payments through the church's secondary accounts. The judge in Millhaven, not Vale, a different judge whose clerk had been on Boone's payroll for 11 years. 15 years. Not 6. 15. The Whitmore property had been the latest in a long sequence of acquisitions that Silas Boone had been building with patience and forgery, and the particular power of a man who understood that people trusted God's representative until the moment they didn't, and by then it was usually too late. Until it wasn't. Abby set the papers back in the satchel and closed the clasp. She looked at Martha across the table. "He's not just coming after the house," she said. "He never was. This is the whole county." Martha looked at the satchel. "What do you do with that?" Abby picked up the satchel. She thought about Judge Constance Vale, who had come to Red Willow Creek for a hearing and stayed an extra day to ensure the ruling was properly entered. She thought about Marsh at the county clerk's office, who had written his 4 sentences and signed his name and lived with the consequences. She thought about Caleb Rusk, who had carried 2 record boxes for the wrong side and then changed direction in time for it to count. She thought about Iris Cobb sleeping in the cellar above a spring that never dried, writing letters to Colorado, making the next plan. "I send it to Judge Vale," Abby said. "All of it. Tonight." Martha nodded once. The kind of nod that is not agreement but recognition of a decision that was never really in question, made by a person who was never really the kind of woman to make a different one. Abby got up and found paper and began to write. The lamp burned steady. The spring ran below her feet. Outside somewhere in this town, Silas Boone was in a room making his own calculations about what came next, not yet knowing that the man who had been helping him carry them for 15 years had just left a leather satchel at an inn and driven out of Red Willow Creek in the dark. Some things collapsed from the outside. The deed challenged the ruling, delivered the fraud exposed in a county hall with a judge watching. Some things collapsed from within. A loyal lawyer with a satchel full of 15 years. A clerk who warned the woman he should have been working against. A deputy who carried boxes for the wrong side and then turned around. Boone had built his structure with other people's silence. And silence, Abby was learning, had a shorter lifespan than springs. The letter from Judge Vale arrived 3 days after Abby sent the satchel north by the fastest rider Russ could find. It was short. Vale wrote the way she spoke, without decoration, without theater, with the direct economy of a woman who had learned that words were most powerful when you used only the ones that were necessary. Miss Whitmore, the materials you forwarded have been received and reviewed. Formal proceedings will be initiated within the week. I will need your availability as a primary witness. I will also need the cooperation of the county clerk's office, which I am confident Mr. Marsh will provide. Please advise Deputy Rusk to preserve his testimony. This will not be a quiet process. Be prepared for that. C. Vale. Abby read it twice. Then she folded it and went downstairs and told Martha. Martha put the kettle on, which was what Martha did when she was processing something significant and needed her hands to be doing something ordinary while her mind caught up. She stood at the stove for a moment without speaking. 15 years, she said finally. 15, Abby said. The county official, the Millhaven clerk, the land acquisitions. Martha turned. How many people in this county knew and said nothing? Some knew, most didn't. Abby sat down. That's the thing about a man like Boone. He doesn't need everyone to know. He needs enough people to benefit from not knowing that they keep quiet on their own. Martha set 2 cups on the table and sat across from her. What happens now? Vale starts proceedings, formally, with documentation. Abby wrapped her hands around the cup. And this town has to decide what it knew, and when, and what it's going to do about it. That decision, it turned out, began the following Sunday. Rusk sat in his usual pew at the back of the First Church of Red Willow Creek. He counted 31 people in a building that held 120. The week before, there had been 60. Boone stood at the pulpit and delivered his sermon to 31 people, and the particular quality of the silence in a room that is used to being full was something that even Boone's practiced voice could not cover. Rusk came to the house afterward and reported what he had seen. He didn't mention the proceedings, Rusk said. He didn't mention you. He preached about faithfulness. A pause. It didn't land. Who was there? Abby asked. The deacons who don't have wives on the trust list. A few older families. Some men who owe him money and can't afford to be seen as disloyal yet. Rusk thought. Pruitt was not there. Pruitt had not been at the church since the day he brought Abby the second witness information and put his hat back on and walked away from 4 years of carrying a bad man's leather satchels. She had heard he was still in town working at the dry goods store, keeping his head down and his choices quiet. She did not hold the 4 years against him. People moved toward better things at different speeds, and the direction mattered more than the timing. 2 days later, the deposition from Samuel Cord arrived from Albuquerque. She had sent him a letter explaining the situation, the trust, the challenge, the need to verify his witness status from 1863. She had sent it not knowing if he was still alive, not knowing if his memory held, not knowing if he would be willing. She had sent it because it was the thing to do, and you did the thing to do, and then you waited. Samuel Cord was 81 years old, according to the note his daughter had written at the top of the deposition, explaining that her father's hand was not steady enough for much writing, but that his mind was entirely clear, and she had transcribed exactly what he said. His deposition confirmed his witnessing of the trust deed in June of 1863. It confirmed Eleanor Whitmore's identity and competence. It confirmed the signatures. And then there was a second page. The daughter had written, "He asked me to include the following, which he says is relevant to the matter at hand." Cord had written a letter to Eleanor Whitmore in 1869. He had heard through the Circuit Preacher Network that a Reverend Boone in Red Willow Creek had been making inquiries about properties registered under trust law in the territory. He had written to warn her. He had kept a copy of that letter in his personal records for 24 years, and he enclosed it now. The letter was dated 3 months before Eleanor had written to Judge Vale, asking whether the trust would hold under contest. Her mother had known in 1869. She had received a warning, taken it seriously, reached immediately to the one judge she trusted, and begun preparing a response that she spent the next 24 years building into something that could survive her death. Abby sat at the kitchen table with Cord's deposition in her hands and felt the full weight of her mother's life settle over her, not as grief, not anymore, but as something closer to awe. Eleanor Whitmore had known for 24 years that this day was coming. She had spent 24 years getting ready for it. She had raised a daughter, run a shelter, maintained a trust, corresponded with a judge, and kept a spring clean, all while the man who wanted to take everything she had built was watching from the other end of town and waiting for the right moment. She had not been afraid of him. She had been preparing for him. There was a knock at the front door. Abby set the deposition down and went to answer it. Silas Boone stood on the front steps. Not Pruitt, not Pike, not a sheriff or a clerk or a man with a fake warrant. Boone himself. Without his clerical collar, for the first time, she had ever seen him without it. Without the hat. Without the practiced warmth that had been his primary instrument for 30 years. He looked older than he had at the funeral. He looked like a man who had been in a private room with himself for several days and had not enjoyed the company. "Miss Whitmore," he said, Abby did not open the screen door. She stood behind it and looked at him through it. "Reverend, I would like to speak with you," he said. "Not through lawyers, not through papers." He paused. "I know what's coming. I know what Vale has. I know what Pike left behind." A pause. "I would like to speak to you as one person to another." She studied him for a moment. The face beneath the face, the man beneath the strategy. She had wondered since the hallway what Boone looked like when the calculation ran out, and she was looking at it now, and it was not what she had expected. She had expected rage or contempt, or the cold, dangerous quality of a man who had not accepted his loss. What she saw instead was something older and more honest than any of those things. Something that looked, if she was reading it correctly, almost like bewilderment. Like a man encountering for the first time the reality that the world did not in fact organize itself around him. She opened the screen door and stepped onto the porch. She did not invite him in. "Say what you came to say," she said. Boone looked at the door behind her, at the house, at the garden Nora had planted along the south wall. He was quiet for a moment in a way that was different from his practiced silences, the ones designed to fill rooms with authority. This silence was the kind a person has when they are trying to find honest words and finding it harder than expected. "The spring," he said finally. "That's what I wanted, not the house, not for the church." He looked at her. "The county is drying up. You know that. The wells on the North Road have been failing for 6 years. My own church cistern ran low 3 summers ago. I've watched it coming." He stopped. "Whoever controls that water controls whether this town survives another 20 years of bad summers." "I know," Abby said. He looked at her, slightly surprised that she was not surprised. "My mother knew too," she said. "That's why she put it in trust, so no single person could control it. So it belonged to the community instead of to whoever had the most legal leverage." She held his gaze. "That's the part you never understood about what she built. You wanted to own the water. She built a structure so nobody could." Boone was quiet. "You could have come to her?" Abby said. 24 years ago. 15. 10. Any time in between. You could have come and said exactly what you just said to me, that the county is drying up and you're worried about the town, and she would have talked to you about it. She was not an unreasonable woman." "She would never have." "You don't know that," Abby said. "Because you never asked. You looked at a woman in a house and you decided what she was and what she wanted and what she was capable of. And then you spent 6 years trying to take what she had instead of sitting across a table from her as an equal." She looked at him steadily. "That's not the county's failure, Reverend. That's yours." Boone looked at the porch boards. It was a long look. The kind a person takes when something has hit a place they did not know was still reachable. Then he put his hat back on, which he had been holding in both hands throughout, and he said, "The proceedings will go forward regardless of this conversation." "Yes," Abby said. "I won't contest them," he said. "The Whitmore property or the trust. I'll instruct what remains of my legal representation to withdraw the challenge." She looked at him. "And the procedural attack on the witness clause?" "Withdrawn," he said. "I received your letter about Cord." A pause. 81 years old, still remembers a deed he witnessed in 1863. Something moved across his face that might have been rueful if he had been a man capable of rue. "Your mother planned a long way ahead." "She had a long time to plan," Abby said. "You gave her 24 years. He went down the porch steps without looking back. She watched him reach the street and turn toward the church steeple, and she understood, watching him walk away, that this was not surrender exactly. Boone was not a man built for surrender. This was something more like exhaustion. The specific exhaustion of a man who has spent decades being certain he was the most important force in a room, and has finally encountered a force that did not care about the room at all. The formal proceedings moved faster than Abby had expected. Vale was thorough and methodical, and it became clear had been waiting for exactly this kind of documentation for longer than anyone outside of a judge's private correspondence would ever know. The county official named in Pike's records resigned within 10 days of the proceedings beginning before the formal charges reached him, which everyone understood to mean he knew what was in those records and had decided that resignation was preferable to what came next. The Millhaven clerk was removed from his position. 3 property transfers from the previous decade were opened for review. Boone preached his last sermon on a Thursday, which was unusual because sermons happened on Sundays. 12 people were there. He spoke for 20 minutes about a verse from Ecclesiastes. There is a time for every purpose under heaven, and then he said he would be leaving Red Willow Creek to pursue his ministry elsewhere, and he thanked the congregation for their faithfulness, and he walked out. Rusk told her about it. She had not been there. "Did he name you?" she asked. "No," Rusk said. "He didn't name anyone. He just left. He was gone by the following Monday. His house closed." His clerk Pruitt reportedly found an envelope on the church office desk with a month's wages in it and a note that said nothing except "Thank you for your service." Whether that was genuine or performed, she could not say. She had decided it was not her business to determine what Silas Boone felt in his private moments. What mattered was what he had done in his public ones, and those were now in Judge Vale's careful records and would not be going anywhere. The town shifted over the weeks that followed. Not dramatically, not all at once. Towns did not work that way, and anyone who expected them to had not been paying attention to how people actually moved through changes they had not chosen. But it shifted. Families who had stopped attending the church on Sunday mornings began appearing at each other's houses again. The Perkins family, who had walked out of Boone's sermon months ago, hosted a dinner for the trust women that the widow Hale told Abby about afterward, in the way of something modest and significant in equal measure. Tom Denton came to the house one afternoon and stood on the front porch with his hat in his hands and said he was sorry he hadn't moved faster when the warrant was presented, and he knew that wasn't enough, but he wanted to say it. "It's said," Abby told him. "Come back if you need something." He nodded. He left. She did not know yet whether Tom Denton was a good man who had been too slow or a careful man who had watched which way the wind was turning before he moved. She was not sure it mattered. What mattered was what he did next, and she would watch that with the same patient attention her mother had applied to this town for 31 years. Iris Cobb left on a Tuesday in late August. She came to find Abby that morning with her bag and her children, 2 boys of 7 and 9, who had their mother's careful stillness and their father's height and eyes that had seen enough that they knew how to watch a room before they entered it. Iris stood in the kitchen doorway with all 3 of them behind her, and she looked at Abby with the expression of a woman who had been preparing what she wanted to say and was now discovering that words were not quite the right instrument for it. "My sister wrote," Iris said. "There's a place for us in Colorado. Steady work. A school for the boys." She stopped. "We're going today, before Frank comes back from the North Road." Abby looked at the 2 boys. The older one looked back at her with a level gaze that said he understood more than children were supposed to understand. The younger one was looking at the floor with the specific interest of a child managing large feelings through small focuses. "You have everything you need?" Abby asked. "We have enough," Iris said. "More than enough." She paused. "Your mother gave me 3 weeks in 1869 and a letter that kept me alive in the years after when things were bad. You gave me 11 days and a plan." She stopped. Her voice was steady. She had made it steady deliberately the way a woman does when she has decided that she has finished crying about this particular chapter of her life and is ready to begin the next one. "I don't know how to say what that is worth." "You don't have to," Abby said. "Go, before it gets too hot." Iris put her arms around Abby once briefly, the kind of embrace that is not sentimental but structural, one person confirming to another that they are real and solid and seen. Then she gathered her boys, and they walked out the back door and down the alley and into the life that was waiting for them 14 miles from a town that had not protected them and would not see them go. Abby stood at the kitchen window and watched the alley long after they had turned the corner and disappeared. The spring ran under the floor. The garden grew along the south wall. The lamp burned in the kitchen window every night without exception, because everyone who needed to know what that lamp meant had learned by now to look for it. More women came. Not the flood that stories like to promise, the triumphant rush of the wronged arriving all at once to claim their vindication. Real life moved the way springs moved, steadily, quietly, following the paths of least resistance, until it had covered more ground than anyone standing at the source could see. A woman from the Flat Rock Road. Two sisters from the farming country east of the creek. A woman Abby's own age who had heard from a friend who had heard from someone at Nora's laundry that the door on Elm Street opened when you knocked on it after dark. They came and they stayed as long as they needed, and they left when they were ready, and some of them left with plans, and some of them left with nothing more than a direction. And all of them left knowing that there was a place that had existed for 31 years and intended to exist for 31 more, and that the woman who kept the lamp burning was not doing it out of charity or sentiment or the need to be needed. She was doing it because her mother had shown her what it looked like to build something that mattered in the dark, where nobody important could see it, and she had decided that was the only kind of building worth doing. Boone's formal charges resulted in a judgment delivered in November. Restitution was ordered on 3 of the fraudulent property transfers. 2 of the properties reverted to their original owners' estates. The county official who had resigned was assessed significant penalties. The Millhaven clerk was barred from public office. It was not everything. It was what the law could reach, and Abby had learned enough about the law in the past months to understand that what it could reach and what justice required were not always the same territory. The gap between them was where women like her mother had built things for 31 years. She accepted the gap. She worked in it anyway. The autumn came, and the heat finally relented, and the town of Red Willow Creek went on being a town complicated and imperfect, and full of people who were better and worse than you expected them to be on any given day. Nora's laundry stayed busy. The widow Hale ran the medical practice that had always been hers in practice, even when it had never been hers in name, and after the proceedings concluded, she filed the paperwork to make it official, and the county approved it without incident. Caleb Rusk kept his badge and kept his pew at the back of a church that had installed a new minister from Santa Fe, who preached shorter sermons and charged lower pew rents, and had, as far as anyone could tell, no plans whatsoever to acquire property through forgery. Martha Bell's inn stayed full, and the house on Elm Street, with its blue shutters and its garden along the south wall and its lamp burning in the kitchen window, every night stayed open. On a November morning, when the first real cold had finally come down from the mountains, and the air had that particular clarity that follows a long summer, the way clarity follows anything that has burned itself out, Abby stood at the back of the house with both hands around a cup of coffee and listened. The spring was running. She could not hear it from out here, but she knew it was running because it was always running, because it was the one thing in this story that had never needed protection or authentication or a judge's signature to continue doing what it did. It simply ran. Under the floor and under the town and under 31 years of everything that had happened above it. Cold and clean and indifferent to the arguments of men. Martha appeared beside her, and they stood there together in the November cold without needing to say anything, which was the best kind of standing beside someone. "The woman from Flat Rock writes," Abby said after a while. "She found work. She found a school." "Good," Martha said. "Iris writes from Colorado. The boys are in school. She's working." A pause. "She said to tell you that the coffee in Colorado is not as good." Martha made a sound that was almost a laugh. "It wouldn't be." Abby looked at the garden. Nora's plants had gone dry in the heat and come back in the rain and gone dry again and come back again, the way things do when they are planted in good ground by someone who knows what they are doing. They would not look like much until spring. But the roots were there. The roots were always the part that mattered. She thought about her mother standing in this same spot some morning 30 years ago, with the same cold air and the same sound of the spring running below her feet, and the same long understanding of what it meant to build something in the dark where no one important was watching. She thought about Eleanor Whitmore deciding that a spring and a hatch and a ladder going down into the earth were not limitations. They were foundations. She thought about a woman who had known for 24 years that everything she built would be tested, and had spent those 24 years making sure it would hold. It held. There were women alive in this valley because of what had been built under the ground of a house that a man had tried to take on the afternoon of the builder's funeral. There were boys in a school in Colorado, and a woman running a medical practice with her own name on the door, and a deputy who had changed direction in time for it to matter. There was a satchel of evidence in a judge's keeping that was going to take years to fully work through and would change the shape of this county by the time it was done. And there was a lamp in the kitchen window of the house on Elm Street burning the way it burned every night, visible from the end of the street to anyone who knew what it meant and needed to walk toward it. Some women build their legacy in public, their names on buildings, their portraits in county halls, their stories told aloud in the kind of rooms where the telling is meant to impress. Eleanor Whitmore built hers 30 feet underground in the dark beside a spring that no man had thought to look for in a town that had looked at her daughter and seen only a heavy woman with no husband and no power and no future that mattered. They had been wrong about everything except the weight. Abigail Whitmore was heavy. Yes, heavy with 31 years of her mother's work and 11 years of 31 women's survival, and the particular weight of a person who has been told for her entire life that she is too much, and has decided finally and without apology that too much is exactly the right amount. The spring ran. The door opened. The lamp burned. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.